The mining town of Broken Creek had no patience for weakness or mouths it deemed worthless. She sat on a splintered crate near the general store, sightless eyes fixed on a world she couldn't see. Her name was Clara, and she had been blind since the scarlet fever stole her parents and her vision. The storekeeper, a man named Grimes, fed her only when someone paid in coin or pity. Silas came down from the high country with a pouch heavy with a season's worth of raw gold. He was a gaunt, quiet prospector whose eyes held the sorrow of 1,000 unwashed, lonely sunsets. He saw Clara shivering as the townsfolk passed, their gazes sliding away like water off stone. Her hands were outstretched, not begging, but feeling the air as if searching for a human shape. Grimes laughed when Silas asked about her, calling her useless baggage that should have been left to die. Silas felt something crack open inside his chest, a long-sealed vault where his own grief had calcified. He reached into his coat and pulled out the heavy leather pouch, his entire winter stake. Without a single word, he emptied the gold dust onto the counter, a glittering sacrificial heap. He said simply, "This buys her freedom and enough bread to last us through the snow." Grimes's greedy fingers clawed at the dust, his piggy eyes gleaming with a triumphant, cruel satisfaction. Silas turned to Clara and gently placed her trembling hand on his calloused, weather-beaten forearm. She followed him, not because she trusted, but because the alternative was a slow, starving death. The townsfolk watched in stunned silence, some sneering, others feeling a sting they couldn't quite name. He lifted her onto his mule, a patient animal named Jasper, and they plodded into the timberline. The trail to his claim was a brutal ascent of switchbacks, jagged rocks, and whispering pines. She didn't speak for the first hour, just held onto the saddle horn with white-knuckled, terrified hands. He described the landscape, the bruised clouds, the silver ribbon of the river far below their path. She tilted her head, memorizing the cadence of his voice, the smell of pine tar and sweat. They reached the cabin as the first flakes of a high country snow began to dust the ground. The cabin was crude but sturdy, a single room with a stone hearth and a pile of furs. Silas lit a fire and placed a tin cup of warm broth into her shaking, chilled hands. She took a tentative sip, and a single tear traced a clean line down her dirty cheek. He asked her name, and she whispered it, her voice a rusty hinge that hadn't been oiled with kindness. He told her his was Silas, and that this place was now as much hers as his. That winter, they built a world from sound, touch, and the slow alchemy of two broken souls. He carved her a smooth walking stick from a fallen aspen limb, sanding it for countless hours. She learned the geography of the cabin by heart, every knot in the floorboards, every hanging herb. She discovered she could hear the pitch of the wind change before a storm rolled over the ridge. Her fingers became her eyes, tracing the edges of his face one hesitant, sacred evening by firelight. Silas held his breath as she mapped the planes of his cheeks and the ridge of his brow. She said he felt like the granite cliffs, weathered but solid, a foundation that would never crumble. He fell in love in that moment, completely and irrevocably, without a single visual cue to justify it. It taught her to split kindling by feel, her other senses sharpening into a preternatural, precise awareness. She taught him to listen for the subtle language of the forest that his eyes had always ignored. When the snow melted, they walked together along the streams, her hand resting lightly on his elbow. She asked him to describe the color of the wildflowers, and he compared them to warmed honey and sunrise. She laughed, a rare, radiant sound, and said she imagined they felt exactly like that. One morning, she knelt by the creek, letting the icy water run through her sensitive, seeking fingers. She suddenly froze, her head cocked, and said the ground beneath the water tasted like cold iron. Silas, a prospector to his marrow, understood what her heightened senses had unconsciously detected. He panned at the spot, and the black sand revealed a heavy vein of silver threading the quartz. The discovery was monumental. Not gold, but silver so pure it would dwarf his previous finds. She had found it with her fingertips and a strange metallic taste that only she could perceive. They didn't rush to town. Instead, they filed a claim quietly and extracted just enough for comfort. Silas used the first silver to buy her a soft wool dress the color of sagebrush after rain. She ran her hands over the fabric and smiled, saying it felt like his voice sounded. Their love deepened, a constant, reassuring presence that asked for nothing but gentle companionship and truth. The news of their strike eventually leaked, and the greedy men of Broken Creek came crawling up the trail. Grimes was among them, his eyes now desperate, his store having failed without Silas's gold to hoard. He demanded a share, claiming Clara was still his ward, but Silas stood firm with a steady glare. Clara stepped forward, her sightless eyes somehow pinning the bully with a moral clarity that made him shrink. She told him she forgave the starvation and the cold, but she would never again be his property. The other prospectors, shamed by her dignity, backed away, muttering that the blind girl had more vision than they. Silas watched her stand tall, and his heart swelled with a pride that no silver vein could match. They used their fortune to build a small school for the town's orphans, sighted and blind alike. Clara taught the children to read with their fingers and to listen to the wind's subtle warnings. Silas taught them to pan for gold without destroying the land, a legacy of sustainable, respectful hope. The couple who had been outcasts became the moral center of a town slowly learning compassion. On a summer evening, they sat on their cabin porch, the scent of lupin drifting through the golden air. Clara told him that being blind had been a gift, because it led her to truly see him. He kissed her palm, the one that had traced his face, and placed it over his steady heart. He said she had traded a world of shadows for a world of touch, and she had chosen him. She replied that he had traded all his gold for a girl. Others saw her as worthless and found everything. The old cabin became a symbol, a pilgrimage site for those seeking proof that love transcends calculation. Grimes, broken and alone, came to them one last time, not to demand, but to apologize. Clara took his hand, feeling the tremor of genuine remorse, and offered him a job tending their garden. He wept, and the last vestiges of his cruelty were washed away by her radical, undeserved grace. Silas never panned for gold again, because the silver was secondary to the treasure he already held. They adopted 2 orphan siblings, teaching them that wealth was measured in kindness, not mineral weight. The children grew up with a blind mother who could spot a liar by the rhythm of their pulse, and a father whose rough hands were always gentle, always open, always ready to give everything away. Silas would often watch Clara standing in the garden, her face tilted toward the unseen radiant sun. He thought about the pouch of gold dust he had dumped on that counter so many years ago. It was the best trade he ever made. A transaction that proved loss is sometimes the only path to gain. Their hair turned silver, then white, matching the mountain peaks that cradled their extraordinary, quiet life. They were buried together under the aspen tree from which he had carved her first walking stick. The town erected a small statue, a blind woman with her hand on a prospector's arm, walking forward. It stands in the square where she once shivered, a permanent reminder that worth is not determined by sight. Children leave wildflowers there, and they always describe the color to her spirit, just as Silas once did. The story of the gold that bought a blind girl and unearthed a silver heart echoes still. It reminds us that the most precious veins are not in the earth, but in the connections we forge. So the next time you see someone the world has cast aside, consider what wealth they might unlock. Now please subscribe to Western Tales Official and become part of a community that values radical, enduring love. Tell me in the comments what you would trade for a love that truly sees beyond the surface. Like and share this video if you believe compassion is the only currency that ever truly endures. From the high, lonely ridges to the depths of a scarred heart, this story is for you. Thank you for walking this path with Silas and Clara, and may your own hands always be open.